House Judiciary Committee, which is one of the most powerful investigative bodies of the U.S. Congress, has dropped the hammer officially. And let me walk you through exactly what's happening. They are pushing now for evidence and documents from 81 different people, organizations, and companies tied to or with knowledge of the activities of Donald Trump. This touches on virtually every aspect of his life and presidency and his contacts with Russians. The requests go to Trump's family, although not to his daughter Ivanka, but to his sons and son-in-law Jared Kushner, to his business and foundation, to members of his outside legal team, which is interesting given the swirling discussions of potential obstruction. It goes to the Trump campaign, including every former aide already indicted by Bob Mueller. The House Democrats are also looking directly into the lives of White House staffers. What did they do at work? And what did the lawyers do in the White House counsel's office, which has leaked so much about potential requests for criminal activity by the president, whether he got people to do it or not? Then new requests here to government agencies like the DOJ and the FBI, which Donald Trump has impugned and attacked. And then tabloid allies tied to the hush money payments to women that Michael Cohen was testifying to just last week. Then multiple people linked to WikiLeaks and a request to WikiLeaks itself and nearly all of the people who went to the now infamous Trump Tower meeting. Each of these people have been told by this investigative body with subpoena power they have to provide the information because of what is now this new sweeping investigation into alleged obstruction of justice by the President of the United States, as well as allegations of public corruption and an inquiry into, quote, other abuses of power. Now, some of these leads, of course, as I mentioned, they come from Michael Cohen. He's on the list himself. 31 of the 81 people and organizations contacted, we checked, came up in just his blockbuster hearing. And while lots of committees are now investigating Donald Trump, the judiciary is the one in charge of any potential beginning of the impeachment process. That is what gives this extra heft. This is also something that shows what Bob Mueller's work could mean in the context of what our Constitution always provides, which is that Congress is the first place to adjudicate abuses of power or potential high crimes by a sitting president. Now, Chairman Jerry Nadler, who's discussed these issues and studied them for a long time, he says, look, this is not I-word time yet, but he argues that Donald Trump effectively has already provided the evidence to show he's committed a crime.
Do you think the president obstructed justice?
Yes, I do. It's very clear that the president obstructed justice.
If that's the case, then is the decision not to pursue impeachment right now simply political, if you believe he obstructed justice?
No, we have to do the investigations and get all this. Before you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen.
I'm joined by the Wall Street Journal's Shelby Holliday, veteran prosecutor Paul Henderson, and Eleanor Clift, a Washington correspondent for the Daily Beast. This is Congress, so we're going to get out to how Congress makes this kind of investigation, starting on the narrower plank of the actual legal implications. Paul, what does it mean when the chairman of the judiciary releases a finding, a conclusion that the president has already committed the crime of obstruction?
Well, it can mean a lot, and let's be clear. They are looking for actionable bad behavior, and actionable bad behavior is what you alluded to before, is the high crimes and misdemeanor. And I know that drifts us into impeachment, because we're not at impeachment yet, but we're definitely on the road. The car is on the road, and this is the gas for that car, this investigation. So we're looking for bad behavior and action items from this president, and we already know a lot of what they are. But I think what stands out to me is how broad and how aggressive this investigation is, that supersedes and expands beyond even what we're going to get from the Mueller investigation whenever that comes out. But that's definitely what the goal is, to
Paul,
uncover more crimes.
If this is the car, a lot of people thought Bob Mueller was driving it. The last time people remember an impeachment proceeding, the then prosecutor, Ken Starr, was driving it, and he provided a bunch of material that pushed Congress in that direction, and everyone knew the political nature of it was that's what the Republicans wanted. Are you suggesting that Jerry Nadler is now really in that car and not Bob Mueller, who's operating under narrower rules than Ken Starr was?
I'm saying that there's more than one car, and there are several investigations going on independent of this investigation, independent of Mueller as well. But this car now is very aggressive and very broad and is going to include a lot of investigative tools that heretofore had been limited in scope. And I think this car is going to pull in all of the other investigations in a more focused and a more narrow pathway that gets us to raising the question of impeachment, not just for Congress, but for the broader public as well. And they're going to tie in all of these other smaller investigations and weave them into a concrete and specific narrative focused on addressing the issue of impeachment, both for the broader public and for the rest of our elected officials to make a decision about what they need to do in terms of the next step, because it includes everything.
Just so I understand you then, is the Nadler car like a big, loud Lamborghini? And the Mueller car was a much quieter, a kind of a Maybach, something that you can barely hear as it goes down the road?
I like that analogy, and I like to think of this car as the bigger car, and we see how big it is because of the scope and the aggressive nature of how that car is moving. And the other cars, which can also get to that same goal, are just a little smaller, maybe a little bit quieter, because they don't encompass all of the things that we're seeing here, with a real focus on Trump's past, his present, and even his future in the scope. I mean, they're even talking about his foundation, his charities, his financial arrangements, his campaign, his election.
It's
sweeping. All in the pot.
It's huge.
It's all there.
It's huge.
It's all in there.
Eleanor, are you interested in getting involved in the automobile analogies?
Well, I'm thinking of a Prius and a Hummer, and I'm not sure which vehicle I assigned to either side. But I think the Democrats have known that they were going to be in the investigatory business for a long time, since really before Election Day. And they have carefully planned out a lot. And with Nancy Pelosi at the helm, she understands the risks of heading down for impeachment when you don't have public opinion. And it is not Robert Mueller's job in his big Hummer to bring along the American people. He's driving towards a legal conclusion. The Democrats, with their sustainable Prius, they're going to educate the American people. And if you don't bring the American people along, impeachment is a fool's errand. And the 81 people they are subpoenaing, the investigations they're going to conduct, it's going to educate the American people. And during Watergate, there were 58 Democrats in the Senate. Now, Richard Nixon resigned before he was convicted, and so he wasn't even impeached. He knew the game was over. There are 48 Democrats now, and if the Republicans want to hold their red wall, fine. But let's see. When the public begins to weigh in, I think, we've been talking to ourselves for the last year and a half, and I think the public out there really, they don't really know what this is all about and why it should matter. They elected, or the people elected Trump because they wanted him to sort of shake things up, and he's done that. So, let the education begin, and I think that's where we're at.
Well, Shelby, Michael Cohen wasn't talking to himself. A lot of people saw that, and they know he rides with Trump. And just looking at one person, when we say 81, I mean, folks coming home here Monday night are seeing this is a lot. But when you dig into the examples, we looked at the Jared Kushner example specifically. Yeah. You have documents here that the Democrats want on Michael Flynn, on the firing of Comey, on Jeff Sessions' recusal, on the attempt to fire Bob Mueller. Donald Trump may not be indicted in office, but if Jared Kushner was an active part of a plot to do that, that looks like obstruction. The Trump Tower meeting, the potential abuse of the pardon power, SDNY, financing. We know Jared Kushner had some issues around the security clearance, WikiLeaks, Trump and Putin, UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. That's just on Kushner.
Yeah, I mean, I think the family and then what I would call the gatekeepers of the Trump organization could be the most dangerous for President Trump, because they've known Trump in so many different capacities. So Jared Kushner is a great example for all the reasons you just listed. His kids are a great example, but also Rona Graff, his assistant. She was the gatekeeper of information, of people who wanted to call and talk to President Trump. She was in touch with the Russian family that helped set up the Trump Tower New York meeting, not Trump Tower Moscow. Hope Hicks was on the airplane when President Trump dictated the response to that Trump Tower
to your
meeting.
point, Rona and Hope.
Yep.
They are Trump's version of the emails. Because he doesn't email,
He doesn't email, he doesn't text.
But these
That's a
are
very good
people who
point.
stand around him and are the closest thing to, and if they keep notes or if you can track or if they say the president or the candidate wants to talk to someone and they write it down, those notes are the closest thing you're going to get to Trump email because there is no email.
And that's a great point. And they're the ones who people will email in order to get to Trump.
Right.
Keith Schiller, his bodyguard, also a very important person. He's traveled with President Trump, then candidate Trump, or I guess then executive Trump to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
He's familiar with the hush money payments and the women that Trump was surrounded by. There are a lot of these quote-unquote gatekeepers around President Trump that aren't affiliated with his campaign or the administration that could be very damaging for him.
You mentioned the hush payments. Eleanor, a former Trump executive who worked with all these people, discussed some of that on The Beat on Friday. Take a look. Do you think that there are other hush money payments that he may know about?
Yes.
How
Just
many?
instinctively, lots.
More than 5?
Probably.
More than 10?
I can't say.
But that strikes you as...
An instinct. Trump would do that kind of thing, and Allen would be the guy that would draw out the check. Probably Trump would sign it himself.
In the order of priorities, Eleanor, how important is it for Democrats to dig into something like that versus things that are actually post-November 2016 and relate to the way he's running the government?
Yeah. I think there is a debate about whether you go after a president for alleged crimes committed before he became president. I think what he's done since he became president should be of a greater priority. And also, if you could put under a heading of, does the public really care about hush money? Okay, there are illegalities there, but we know what Trump's character is. We know he's been with other women. We heard Michael Cohen, I think, say very convincingly, apologizing to the First Lady, for lying to her. So I think that's salacious, but I think that's not as important as the way he has trod on government rules, the way he has profited from the presidency since he's taken possession of the Oval Office, and it almost feels that way. He's trying to run the country like he did the Trump Organization with all the same illegalities. I'm anxious to hear from the CEO of the Trump Organization, and he has immunity to a certain extent. But I think all these figures are going to take on lives of their own as they parade before Congress. And back with again Iran-Contra, there was actually a handbook was issued so you could keep track of all the players, and there was Fawn Hall and Oliver North, and so I think these people are going to become real-life, three-dimensional characters in the minds of the American people.
About them and about the judgment that went into the powers that they were given. I'm going to turn to Richard Painter, so I want to thank the entire panel, Shelby Paul and Swellenor.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Basically, the other big news tonight is 3 other powerful House committee chairs demanding the White House give up more information on the innards, the secret details of what Donald Trump has been discussing with Putin, including, of course, these translators, sometimes the only other American person in the room. So for the legalities of all this, I want to bring in someone who knows the law and knows how the White House works. Richard Painter was chief White House ethics lawyer in the George W. Bush administration. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening.
Let's get right into this piece alone, not the wider 81 people, but something that goes to the way American national security is being conducted. What does it mean that Donald Trump made the decision to have so few, and sometimes only one person in that room? And is this the right purview of Congress? Or when you were in the White House, would you have argued against it as a lawyer and said, this is presidential prerogatives, you don't get that kind of stuff?
I would have argued against the president having one-on-one conversations with Vladimir Putin without anyone in the room. That's what I would have argued against. It's absolutely absurd. And just to have a translator there without anybody else, without any of the national security personnel, that's a very, very unwise move on behalf of the president. And Congress certainly should investigate, particularly when we have all of the other contacts with Russia. The fact that multiple members of this administration have lied about their meetings with the Russians, the fact that Donald Trump himself sought investment opportunities in Russia, the fact that the Russians were invited to hack Hillary Clinton's email by Donald Trump, did do so, the contacts between Roger Stone and WikiLeaks, the list goes on and on.
So would you want
and you
to,
put all that together.
how would you want to ask about that? I mean, Richard, as you talk about it, it sounds more and more interesting. If you were advising that House panel, would you say, yeah, get this translator into closed session, don't let it become necessarily a public spectacle, but ask, did the president and Putin, what? Did they talk about a joint defense agreement? Did they talk about leaks, Clinton, that kind of stuff?
Everything. I'd get that translator into a closed-door session with the committee and go through everything in those conversations between our president and Vladimir Putin. This is a very dangerous situation. We don't have conclusive proof that the president is a Russian mole, but he's certainly acting like it. And the Congress needs to investigate and find out exactly what was said to Vladimir Putin and look at the rest of this Russia connection. Remember, Robert Mueller is only responsible for alleged criminal activity in connection with the Russia investigation. There's a lot more going on here that could be very, very dangerous for our national security. And this president's relationship with Vladimir Putin is very strange indeed.
Well, you just put your finger on it. A lot of this gets narrowed to just what's a felony. And at the end of the day, if any president, not just this president, if any president had it exposed that, for example, they were coordinating messages against our own CIA with a foreign leader, that might not technically be a felony, but it certainly would be something the American people and I think the Congress would want to know about and maybe do something about. Richard Painter, busy night. I always appreciate you making time for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ari.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.